An article published this week in AJR looked at the real-world impact of a commercially available artificial intelligence tool for detection of incidental pulmonary emboli on CT exams of the chest or abdomen. The authors focused on how the tool affected the collective performance of the department's radiologists. Sensitivity for PE increased from 80% without AI to 96.2% with AI, with no significant change in specificity. I'm Andy Rosenkrantz, editor-in-chief of AJR, and I'm here today to discuss the article with its senior and corresponding author, Dr. Steven Rothenberg, assistant professor of radiology at the University of Alabama and a current rank and Ray scholar. Dr. Rothenberg, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to discuss our research with you today.
To start us off, can you give us some background about how you got involved in AI research?
Sure. So about 10 years ago, I got interested in AI research and started doing some textual-based analysis where I trained some models to actually predict some of our billing codes. And that was kind of my first foray into machine learning research. At that time, we were getting phenomenal results, and I thought, wow, this is going to be a pretty impactful technology for the field and healthcare in general.
So can you summarize for our listeners how the AI tool in this particular study worked?
So the tool used in our particular study is intended for AI triage. What that means is that cases that have a potential critical finding on them are prioritized so that by notifying radiologists using a floating widget that was installed on all of our PACS workstations.
So with that context, in this study, the AI tool was implemented in two phases to look at different endpoints involving radiologists alone versus AI alone, as well as radiologists with versus without AI. Can you summarize for us just what you did in terms of this multi-phased implementation?
Yeah, so in this study, we explored a multi-phased implementation of an AI algorithm and assessed its real-world performance. We did this by looking at or specifically analyzing data from two specific phases of our deployment. One was a pre-deployment or phase one, or the initial sort of preparatory work in order to, before we went live with the algorithm, where we assessed the algorithm's performance without the radiologist being aware or understanding or using the actual tool. And so that was the initial phase of our study, which lasted approximately 6 weeks. Then after the 6 weeks pre-implementation phase, also known as phase one in our study, we let radiologists use the tool, get familiar with using the tool, and we also trained our radiologists on how to use and interface this. This was done, and then once we felt that radiologists were comfortable with using the tool, we then started a phase two, which was analyzing which was starting a data collection phase where we looked at how radiologists' performance was improving or changing with the addition of this technology in practice.
And how is the study different from prior literature on AI for PE detection?
This study differs from current literature in two different distinct ways. First, and importantly, this was a prospectively designed study. So before we even implemented the AI technology, what we did was we sat down, we set our goals. We did a power analysis to power the study to see, we were expecting to see changes in sensitivity. So the study, or the way that we actually explored the technology, is different than the intended use or what it's actually FDA cleared for. One of the things that we were very interested in was, how does this improve our sensitivity, specificity, and accuracy as radiologists, in addition to our report turnaround times? And so what we did was we prospectively designed the study. We powered the study based off sensitivity, because that was our key metric, by looking at other studies that have been already performed in the literature. And then we sort of stuck to our guns in terms of how we were going to analyze the data. And so we did it in a very sort of rigorous way in which we evaluated the performance of this specific tool within our department.
And the study comments on what's termed the enhanced detection rate using AI. Can you explain this concept for our listeners?
Yeah, so the enhanced detection rate is a really interesting metric. This is actually a post hoc analysis that we added on after we completed our study. This was proposed in a multi-society position paper as a way to explore and evaluate AI technology. It shouldn't really be used as a standalone metric, but it is a very pragmatic way to evaluate AI in that you are essentially looking at the discrepancies or the number of times that AI identifies a missed critical finding, and then divided by the number of actual findings that were identified. It's not exactly an increase in sensitivity because you can have a number that's greater than one. So it's not a perfect metric, but it is fairly pragmatic because it's easy to review and analyze. All you need to do is look at where there are discrepancies between AI flag positive results and reports that do not have a reported finding on it. So it's a fairly simple metric to look at where AI could potentially improve detection. And so it's a relatively new and unique concept. I believe we're the first paper to actually do the analysis formally and include it in our workup. But I think it'll be an interesting sort of metric to look at and evaluate moving forward.
And despite the better detection with AI, turnaround times were not significantly different. Can you comment more on that?
Yeah, this is a really interesting and important sort of finding of our study. And I think it comes down to really what is the baseline performance in our department. And so we have generally well-staffed group where our turnaround times, even for outpatient imaging, is fairly quick and robust. So our mean turnaround times are in the 70-minute sort of time frame, within our outpatient imaging facilities and just overall. And so the actual triage or improvements there aren't necessarily as big as what you could have or what could potentially be gained if you're talking about days to weeks turnaround time mismatches. As to other studies in the literature, other groups that have had tremendous success with the turnaround times, they actually started out with huge gaps in terms of what their SLAs are, what their overall performance was for turning around an exam. And so in that case, in those particular use cases, triage might be more important for the turnaround times or for the benefit in turnaround times, as opposed to a place where your average turnaround times are already in pretty good shape.
Although not directly evaluated in the study heavily infers that it is better to integrate AI tools into the work list rather than use them through a standalone widget. Can you comment further on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is really important for the way we deploy and think about some of this technology. And so, obviously, having things as a standalone sort of um, application make it easier to deploy on our IT teams, right? There's less sort of integration work that has to be done. As you may, as people listening may or may not be aware, it's very difficult to get these disparate systems that are designed by different groups by our vendors to actually communicate well and play nicely with each other. And so the standalone implementation is easier from a simplicity perspective. It's like an easy way to sort of get started and see if there's benefit there for the given technology. But I think longer term, in terms of the strategy or the way in which we deploy and implement these sorts of technologies, it's important to think about what the overall workflow is. And based on our initial work, we've kind of designed and made some system level changes at our group for how we use and monitor this technology. And so subsequently, we have done the worklist integration, and we've also created some additional workflows that allow us to verify and ensure that we are detecting as many of these critical results as possible to ensure that patients get the highest level of care.
So to close, what would you say has been the biggest impact of the study on your practice?
So I think the biggest impact has been on sort of a quality system that we actually set up while doing the study that is still ongoing and is pretty robustly used, led by one of my collaborators, Dr. Jordan Perchek. I mean, it's phenomenal process that we have going on in that, even in between phase 1 and phase 2, we still saw that there were some PEs that were missed by the radiologist, even though it was flagged as positive. And so what we have done is we've created an internal process where we're reviewing our discrepancies in near real time, usually about within 24 to 48 hours. And then if there is a discrepancy where we believe that AI is positive and the report is negative, that's escalated to whoever interpreted the study. And if that person is unavailable, it goes to, whoever is in the section is reading that day. And so I think that has been a, tremendous process that we sort of implemented as a quality control during the study. And I think it's been extremely impactful because we've definitely identified and close the gap in terms of identifying people who have potentially missed findings and making sure that they're not missed and that they get the appropriate treatment.
Dr. Rothenberg, thanks so much for joining us.
Awesome. Yeah. And thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.